You walked into this office like you still had a claim on anything with my name on it. Gloria and I moved every transferable share out of your reach 6 months ago while you were too busy pretending you mattered. Sign the release tonight or every partner in Billings will hear exactly how little loyalty you ever showed this family. Hi, my name is Tessa Holt, I am 34 years old. I stared at the papers my father slid across the conference table and felt the old, familiar burn settle behind my ribs. He sat there in his usual pressed shirt, jaw set like he had just delivered a weather report instead of the quietest knife I had ever felt. My stepmother stood behind his chair with her arms folded, that thin smile she reserved for moments when she thought she had already won. My half-brother leaned against the window, scrolling his phone like the whole scene bored him. I picked up the pen they had so thoughtfully provided and turned it once between my fingers. Interesting timing, I said. Right after the quarterly numbers came in clean and the expansion loan got approved. My father did not blink. Timing is everything. You should have learned that by now. The room felt smaller than it had 5 minutes earlier. Outside the glass walls of the small commercial suite we used for family-held holdings, the late afternoon traffic of Billings moved on without caring who was about to lose what. I set the pen down without signing. You transferred the operating accounts and the warehouse equity without a single board notice. That is not a family decision. That is a silent asset transfer. My stepmother's voice came out soft and almost pleasant. It is called protecting what we built while you chased your little side projects. Some of us stay focused. I looked at her, then back at my father. You mean the projects that kept the cash flow positive when your preferred vendor contracts started bleeding money last winter? My half-brother finally glanced up. Here we go. Always the victim. I did not answer him. I pulled my phone from my bag, opened the secure folder I had prepared 3 weeks earlier, and laid the printed phone log summary on the table between us. The timestamps were clear. Calls between my father and my stepmother. Calls to the bank officer. Calls to 2 of the junior partners who now refused to meet my eyes in the hallway. Every transfer authorization sat there in black ink, dated, confirmed, and never shared with me. My father's face did not change, but the muscle under his left eye tightened once. You went through private records. I went through records that still listed me as a principal until last Thursday, I said. Funny how that changed the same day the transfer cleared. My stepmother stepped closer to the table. You have always been dramatic, Tessa. This is business. Not a personal attack. Then explain why the real estate agent handling the warehouse listing received instructions to route all offers through an entity that does not include my name. Silence stretched. My half-brother pocketed his phone and pushed off the window. Dad, just tell her the rest so we can leave. My father folded his hands. The rest is simple. The partners have already chosen. They prefer stability. You bring noise. Effective immediately, you are removed from day-to-day authority. The release makes it clean. Sign it and we avoid the uglier conversations. I laughed once, short and sharp. Uglier than rewriting ownership while I was still listed on the operating agreement? That is a high bar. He leaned forward. You can walk out of here with a modest severance and your pride, or you can force this into public view and watch every door in this town close. Your choice. I stood. The chair scraped louder than I intended. Keep the severance. I will keep the phone logs. My stepmother's smile thinned. Those logs prove nothing except that you are still trying to create problems where none exist. I gathered the papers, the pen, and the printout. They prove the exact sequence of calls that moved every liquid asset out of joint control while I was still under the impression we were a family operation. That is not a problem I created. That is a problem you scheduled. My father rose as well. You have until 9 tomorrow morning. After that, the partners receive a full briefing on your pattern of obstruction. Do not test. How quickly this city turns. I walked to the door without looking back. In the hallway, my colleague Nora Bennett waited with a folder of the day's invoices. She took one look at my face and fell into step beside me. "That bad?" she asked. "Worse," I said. "They already moved the money. Now they want the signature that makes it legal after the fact." Nora kept her voice low. "The junior partners are already whispering. 2 of them asked me this morning whether the expansion loan still had your guarantee attached." I stopped at the elevator. Of course they did. Stability is a wonderful word when it means choosing the people who already hold the accounts. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside alone. As they closed, I saw my half-brother watching from the conference room doorway, expression flat, already calculating the next angle. In the parking garage, I sat in my car with the engine off and the phone log printout still in my lap. The timestamp stared back at me. Every call. Every transfer. Every quiet decision made while I was still showing up to the office and signing payroll. My hand stayed steady. That was the part that surprised me most. No shaking. Just the cold clarity that comes when the people who raised you finally stop pretending the knife was ever accidental. I opened a new message to my attorney Victor Lang and attached the scan of the logs. One line only: "They moved everything. Need options before 9 tomorrow." Then I drove out of the garage and onto the street that led toward the edge of town. The sun was dropping behind the rimrocks. Somewhere behind me, my father and my stepmother were already drafting the version of the story they would hand the partners. Somewhere ahead, the quiet work of proving them wrong had already started. I had spent years telling myself family loyalty was a two-way street. Turns out some streets only run one direction, and the toll is collected in silence. If you have ever watched people you trusted quietly rewrite the rules while smiling to your face, you already know how heavy that moment feels. What would you have done if the person who taught you to trust numbers turned those same numbers against you? Overnight? I sent the message to my attorney and kept driving until the rimrocks faded into the darker edge of town, the phone log printout still sitting on the passenger seat like a receipt for every quiet betrayal I had just confirmed. By the time I parked outside my small rental, the decision had already settled. I was done waiting for them to pretend this was anything other than a calculated erasure. Victor Lang called me back within 20 minutes. His voice stayed even, the way it always did when the numbers turned ugly. I reviewed the timestamps. The transfers cleared through Samuel Torres at the bank the same afternoon. The operating agreement still listed you as a principal. That gap alone is enough to force disclosure. Meet me tomorrow at 8. Bring every original printout and the digital chain. I agreed and hung up. Sleep did not come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my father's calm delivery of the ultimatum, the way he made destruction sound like good management. At 6 the next morning, I was already dressed and reviewing the file again when Nora Bennett texted. 2 junior partners had asked her, off the record, whether the expansion loan guarantee still carried my name. They wanted distance. Stability, they called it. I answered with one line: let them choose. Then I drove to Victor's office. He had the conference room ready and the phone logs spread across the table under clear sleeves. "These calls between your father and Gloria form a pattern," he said. Then the calls to Torres. Then the quiet instruction to the real estate agent routing offers away from any entity that includes you. We can demand an emergency accounting. If they refuse, we file. I nodded once. File. They gave me until 9. I prefer to answer early. At 8:45 my phone lit up with a message from my half-brother. "Dad says the partners are meeting at 10. You might want to be there if you still care about optics." I showed Victor. He only raised an eyebrow. "They are forcing the public version." "Good. Let them." We arrived at the commercial suite 15 minutes before the hour. The conference room was already half full. 2 of the junior partners sat with their arms crossed. Harper Croft, the business partner who had once shared late-night strategy calls with me, kept her eyes on the table. Samuel Torres from the bank occupied the far end, looking like a man who wished he had called in sick. My father stood at the head of the table. My stepmother sat to his right, posture perfect, expression carefully neutral. My half-brother lounged near the window again, phone in hand. My father did not waste time. Everyone is here. Tessa has chosen not to sign the release. That leaves us with a simple decision about ongoing authority and risk. I stayed standing. The decision was already made when the operating accounts and warehouse equity moved without notice. What you want now is ratification after the fact. One of the junior partners cleared his throat. We need certainty on the loan guarantee. If her name stays attached and this turns contentious, the bank may revisit terms. Samuel Torres shifted in his chair. The guarantee remains in place until formally released. That is all I can confirm. My stepmother spoke for the first time, voice smooth. Which is exactly why a clean signature protects everyone. Dragging this into formal dispute only creates the noise the partners are trying to avoid. I looked at Harper Croft. You reviewed the cash flow projections with me last month. You know the side projects they keep dismissing are the ones that covered the vendor shortfalls. Are you comfortable calling that noise? Harper's jaw tightened, but she did not answer. The silence itself was the answer. Partners choose sides the way water chooses the lowest ground. I had expected it. Expecting it did not make the quiet abandonment any less bitter. Victor stepped forward and placed copies of the phone log printout in front of each person. These timestamps document the sequence of calls that authorized the transfers while Tessa remained a listed principal. Any claim of routine business requires explaining why the principal was excluded from every relevant conversation. My father's face stayed composed, but the room temperature dropped a few degrees. Private family discussions do not require an audience. They do when those discussions move jointly held assets, Victor replied. My half-brother finally looked up from his phone. This is getting expensive for no reason. Just sign the paper, Tess. Nobody wants a drawn-out fight. I met his eyes. You mean nobody wants the paper trail examined? Those are different preferences. My father closed the folder in front of him. The partners have heard enough. We will proceed with the briefing as planned. Tessa, you have until the end of the day to reconsider. After that the narrative leaves this room. I gathered my copies and walked out without another word. Victor followed. In the hallway he spoke quietly. They will push the partners hard this afternoon. Expect pressure calls. Do not respond. Let them create the record. I spent the rest of the morning at a quiet corner table in a cafe across from the office, phone face down, reviewing every email and text that still sat on the company server. Nora joined me at noon with a fresh set of invoices and a tight expression. 2 more partners asked me whether I was still aligned with you. Their words. They are drawing lines. Let them draw, I said. Lines make the map clearer. By 3 o'clock the first pressure call arrived. Harper Croft's number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was careful, almost kind. She hoped I understood the need for stability. She hoped we could keep personal feelings out of business. She hoped I would sign so everyone could move forward. I deleted it without listening twice. At 4:30 my phone rang again. This time the number belonged to my stepmother. I almost ignored it. Then the mid-afternoon light shifted and something in my chest tightened with the old, practiced caution. I answered on speaker and hit record. Her voice came through smooth and slightly breathless. Tessa, this has gone far enough. Your father is only trying to protect what we built. You are turning a private correction into a public spectacle. Sign the release and we can still handle this quietly. Push further and the partners will have no choice but to cut every remaining tie. Is that really the story you want circulating in this town? I kept my tone flat. You mean the story where the transfers happened first and the justifications came later? A short pause. Then her voice lowered. You always did prefer the dramatic reading. Just remember who still holds the relationships that keep the doors open. 9 o'clock was generous. The window is closing. She hung up. I stopped the recording, saved it, and forwarded the file to Victor with one sentence: crisis call. Confession of pressure and coordinated timeline. Victor replied within minutes. This helps. Combined with the logs, it shows intent. I am preparing the emergency motion. Do not engage further tonight. I drove home as the sky over Billings turned the color of old steel. Inside the rental, I placed the phone log printout and the new recording side by side on the kitchen table. The pattern was no longer a suspicion. It was a sequence. Silent transfers. Coordinated calls. Public pressure. Partners already choosing the safer side of the table. My phone buzzed once more. A text from my half-brother. Dad says the partners are unified. Last chance before this gets formal. I did not answer. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it with the date and the single word evidence. Then I sat in the quiet and waited for the next move they thought I would not see coming. Somewhere across town, my father and my stepmother were almost certainly refining the version of events they would hand the partners in the morning. Somewhere the bank officer was calculating his own exposure. Somewhere the real estate agent was still routing offers away from any document that carried my name. The quiet work of erasure continued on schedule. I poured a glass of water I did not drink and stared at the recording file still open on my screen. The next step would not be another conversation. The next step would be the formal demand that forced every transfer, every call, and every carefully worded justification into the open. I had the logs. I had the pressure call. I had the timeline they never expected me to assemble. What they did not know yet was that the quietest part of the plan had already begun to unravel the moment my stepmother decided a recorded phone call was safer than silence. I saved the recording of my stepmother's call and left the file open on the screen while the rest of the evening settled into the kind of silence that only arrives after the last useful lie has been spoken. By morning, Victor Lang had the emergency motion ready and the phone log printout plus the new audio packaged for formal service. We filed before 9. The demand required full accounting of every transfer, every authorization, and every communication that moved operating accounts and warehouse equity while I remained a listed principal. Copies went to my father, my stepmother, the bank officer Samuel Torres, the real estate agent Grant Keller, and each junior partner who had already begun choosing sides. The response window was 72 hours. Silence after that would trigger the next filing. The first reply arrived from Harper Croft by mid-afternoon. She asked for a private meeting. I agreed to a neutral conference room downtown, nothing belonging to the family holdings. She arrived alone, hands folded, eyes tired. I reviewed the logs, she said. The sequence is clear. I cannot keep pretending this was routine. The partners are split. 2 of them want distance from anything that smells like coordinated exclusion. The others still believe your father's version of stability. I kept my voice level. Stability that requires erasing a principal after the money has already moved is not stability. It is cleanup. Harper nodded once. I am stepping back from the expansion committee until this is resolved. That is the only clean position left. She left without asking me to soften anything. One partner choosing the record over the relationship was more than I had expected. The rest of the day brought nothing but formal acknowledgments of receipt. My father did not call. My stepmother did not text. My half-brother sent one message at dusk: "You turned a family correction into a legal circus. Hope the attention is worth it." I did not answer. 72 hours later the accounting arrived, incomplete and carefully worded. Transfers were described as internal rebalancing. The phone logs were dismissed as private family discussion. The pressure call was not mentioned at all. Victor read the response twice, then looked at me across the table. They are daring us to escalate. The incomplete accounting plus the recorded call gives us enough for a temporary restraining order on further movement of assets and a formal request for forensic review. Authority steps in the moment a judge sees the timeline. I authorized both. The order issued the following morning. All remaining accounts and the warehouse listing froze pending full disclosure. Samuel Torres at the bank received the notice first. Within hours, the junior partners who had stayed silent began returning calls to Victor, each one suddenly interested in preserving their own exposure. Harper Croft's earlier withdrawal looked prophetic. The formal confrontation happened in a small hearing room 3 days later. No gallery, no theatrics, just the parties, counsel, and a magistrate who had already reviewed the sealed packet of logs and the audio. My father sat rigid. My stepmother kept her expression smooth. My half-brother stayed outside after Victor made clear his presence added nothing useful. Victor played the recording. My stepmother's voice filled the room, calm and precise, acknowledging the window, the partners, the coordinated pressure, and the need for a signature that would clean up what had already been moved. The magistrate listened without interruption. When it ended, he looked at my father's counsel. The sequence of transfers predates any claim of obstruction. The recorded call confirms knowledge and intent to force ratification after the fact. Temporary restraints remain in place. Full forensic accounting is ordered. Any further unilateral movement of assets will be treated as contempt. My father did not look at me. My stepmother's hand stayed folded in her lap. The quiet authority of the order did more damage than any raised voice could have. Outside the hearing room, Victor spoke only once. They will settle. The record is too clean. They settled 11 days later. The terms were narrow and final. All transferred operating funds and warehouse equity returned to joint control long enough for a court-supervised valuation. My name was removed from every guarantee and every operating agreement at my request. In exchange, I received a one-time distribution equal to my documented share, paid through the court and free of further claim. The family holdings continued under my father's sole authority. The partners who had chosen his side kept their seats. Harper Croft resigned from the expansion committee and later opened her own consulting practice across town. I signed the final papers in Victor's office on a gray afternoon. The distribution cleared the next week. I deposited it, paid Victor, and redirected the remainder into a separate account that carried only my name. The family fortune, or at least the portion that had been quietly moved and then forced back into the light, ended up exactly where the numbers said it belonged. No public announcement. No victory lap. Just the quiet redirection the court made possible. My father sent one final letter through counsel. It contained no apology, only a statement that the matter was closed and further contact was unnecessary. My stepmother never wrote. My half-brother sent a single text that I deleted without reading twice. Remaining ties, already thin, snapped with the same efficiency they had once used to move money. I kept the phone log printout and the recording in a sealed envelope in my desk. Not as trophies. As proof that the quietest betrayals still leave records if someone is willing to assemble them. Nora Bennett stayed on as a colleague in the new consulting work I began with Harper Croft. Paige Ellis, the accountant friend who had helped me verify the early discrepancies, joined us part-time. The rest of the old circle stayed exactly where they had chosen to stand. Months later, I drove past the commercial suite one last time. The sign still carried my father's name. The windows looked the same. Nothing about the building suggested the months of silent transfers, pressure calls, and formal restraints that had passed through it. That was the final lesson the numbers taught me. Some structures survive by erasing the people who once held them up. Walking away from those structures is not failure. It is the only form of self-respect left when loyalty runs in only one direction. I do not regret forcing the record into the open. I regret only that the people who raised me made the record necessary. The distribution sits in an account that no longer requires anyone else's signature. The consulting work pays the bills without family drama attached. The quiet is not peaceful, but it is mine. Self-respect comes first. Everything else is negotiable until it is not. Releasing toxic ties does not restore what was taken. It simply stops the taking. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever stood in a room while the people who should have protected you quietly rewrote the rules around you, How far would you have let the silence go before you forced the numbers into the light?